For more on all of this, let's bring in Georgia Republican Congressman Buddy Carter. He's a member of the House Energy and Budget Committees. Let's talk about energy for a moment. Gas prices still way up in this country. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel, Congressman?
Well, I think there is a light at the end of this tunnel, but let's keep in mind that high gas prices are the policy of the Democrats. Remember that in 2022, in June of 2022, gas was $5 and $6 a gallon. That's because of the Democratic policies. Had it not been for Donald Trump unleashing American energy, can you imagine what prices would be right now for gas? Yes, they are higher right now, but as soon as this conflict is over with, and it will be over with, you'll see gas prices go back down again. We saw it during the temporary time that the Strait of Hormuz was open. We saw it fall to below $80 a barrel. Prices went down, and they will go down again as soon as this is resolved.
Mike Pompeo, obviously, our former Secretary of State, was on with Aisha Husni earlier. He says that the U.S. is holding all the cards when it comes to the Iranian situation. Listen.
This blockade has proven effective. The military has performed flawlessly, and the Iranian economy will force Vahadi and all the knuckleheads that lead the IRGC, these theocrats who believe deeply in the destruction of Israel and the elimination of the United States, will force them to make some very difficult decision in just a handful of next weeks.
Do you accept that characterization? I mean, President Trump wrote that letter to Congress saying hostilities are over.
Well, I agree with my friend Mike Pompeo. I think that Iran is at a place where they need to come to the table and they need to negotiate. They're losing $500 million every day as a result of the blockade of their ports. They can't afford to do that very long. They need to realize that. And they need to come to the table and negotiate and get the best deal that they can get. Otherwise, I'm afraid if they think Donald Trump is kidding, they need to think again. This is a man who says what he means and means what he says.
Let's talk about redistricting. The Supreme Court obviously made that huge ruling this week, the Calais ruling. Your governor, Brian Kemp, says redistricting in your state is not going to happen just yet. Listen. I'm sorry. It's actually a quote from him, but I'll read it to you. He says the Supreme Court's decision, Louisiana versus Calais, restores fairness to our redistricting process and allows states to pass electoral maps that reflect the will of the voters. Voting is already underway for the 2026 elections, but it's clear that Calais requires Georgia to adopt new electoral maps before the 2028 election cycle. So if that happens, what happens to congressional representation in Georgia?
Well, it'll change. And I have to say, respectfully, I disagree with the governor. I think that they should call a special session right now and redo the districts as they exist now. Listen, Georgians deserve to be represented by values that represent their values, and Democrats do not represent Georgia values. That's why I'm running against John Ossoff for the Senate, because he does not represent Georgia values. And we need the governor to call for a special session now so that we can redistrict now, so that we can make sure that Georgians are represented like they should. The Supreme Court made the right decision, and they made sure that intentional racial discrimination is not being done. During the last redistricting, it was racial discrimination. Now we know that, and now we need to correct it.
Okay, but what about the governor's point that voting has already begun in the 2026 races?
Well, early voting has begun, but we need to delay the House races right now, the House races, and then we can redistrict, and it will better reflect Georgians and their values. And it'll be somewhat disruptive, but at the same time, Tennessee's going in Monday to redistrict. They're going in already. Look at what Florida has done. Look at what other states have done. Georgia needs to follow suit and do the same thing.
Do you worry, though, that if other states, blue states, redistrict as well, that they are going to overwhelm any advantage Republicans might get from redistricting, drawing new district lines?
I don't think so. It's been estimated that in the southern states alone, if we do not have to adhere to the Voting Rights Act, as we should not have to adhere to it, that we will pick up almost 19 seats. And I think that would give us the advantage there. But the most important thing to remember here is that you want representation of values of each state. And that's what we would have in the state of Georgia if we were to redistrict now. We'd have more Republican values, which reflects the values of our state.
Do you think the Supreme Court decision essentially means that the Voting Rights Act, the issues that it was intended to address, have been fixed in this country?
I think they have. I don't think you can judge a political party by the color of someone's skin. Just because they have a certain color of skin does not mean they adhere to a political party. Those times are over with now. There are plenty of people out there who have conservative values who deserve to be represented, and they're of all skin colors. So that should not be taken into consideration when you're redistricting or when you're looking at congressional districts.
We elected Barack Obama nationwide. Does that not suggest that race is not such a big issue as it was back in the 50s and 60s?
I would certainly say it does. Look at Kamala Harris. I mean, you know, and I don't think race is. I don't think gender is. I think, you know, we're in 2026 and we need to have policies that are applicable to 2026.
Congressman Buddy Carter, Republican from Georgia, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.